Ready to roll here?
Yep.
All right. This is Joe, everybody. How's everybody doing? I want to start out with a couple of things. One, Ruben had sent out oops, that thing's all out of my ear. Ruben had sent out an email asking if there are any questions in advance, and he got one from Katie Lee, and I'll let Courtney Pollock address that first.
Yeah, thanks. And Katie, thanks for the question. I think your question was around, that you got a question about why do we call this or include the phrase peak performance in the title of this workshop. And I think helpful maybe to address it from two angles. One, part of what I'm hearing you ask is, how do I talk about this workshop to people who ask me about it? And then also, how did we come up with that name? I think Ruben made a good point that we asked internally, everybody, what do you guys think of the name? What do we want to include in it? What resonates? We've seen in the past where the titles of PCA workshops make a difference in terms of people's interest, whether they think it's relevant to them, regardless of what the actual content may be, the name matters. And so peak performance was something that came up time and again from the feedback from the staff, specifically the PM team, that was something they felt would catch people's attention, would be, give them a feeling of it being relevant. So that's one reason why we have it in here. We talked about this a ton when we were developing this workshop because peak performance, part of what you said, Katie, was the person said, oh, couldn't every workshop be peak performance? And the short answer is yes. There's so many different components to peak performance. And, I mean, the definition is a state in which a person feels or a person performs to the maximum of their ability. So all of the things, E-Tank, Honoring the Game, Elm, they all contribute to that. But we felt like Elm rose to the top in terms of allowing a person to be in that state. And so in terms of the feedback from the staff and the feeling we had about Elm in particular, that was why we have peak performance in the name. I think in terms of being able to give a better description of the workshop and all those details, hopefully you're able to do that after Joe goes through the slides. But I hope that little bit of a description helps. I'm happy to say more if needed.
Yeah, that's great. It was a question that it will be nice to have an answer to the person that asked it, more so than I didn't agree with the fact that I think every workshop can cover peak performance. I think they can all cover everything, but they asked, and they're one of those people that will likely follow up. So
right,
it was good that it came up.
Cool.
Thank you.
Great. So the first thing I'm going to do is, if you are not driving, if you're sitting at a desk, I would be grateful if you'd take out a piece of paper and something to write with. And that's for a couple of reasons. We can use it at some point during the activities, during the workshop, but I would also like you to write down questions, especially broad questions that come up, or specific questions about things going on in the workshop. Because we're doing this call a little differently, we want to make sure that we get the demo in under an hour and have the remaining half hour or more, or up to that amount of time, to discuss the workshop, ask questions, and talk about some things. So the first thing I want to say about this workshop is, as Courtney indicated, this is a deep dive into the ELM principle. And as a deep dive, when your trainers present this, it should really be strongly interactive and really include the voice and the expertise of the coaches and the participants in the room. Obviously, all of our workshops do that, but this one really relies on it. I happen to actually really love this workshop, and one of the reasons is, and I'll tell you a quick story, is at Trainer Institute last year, we did this for the first time with a bunch of our trainers, and some of them are pretty high-level sports psychology folks, and they practically came to blows over some of the concepts and chose to stay around. It was a late-night session. They chose to stay around for another hour and discuss concepts in this workshop. So I knew at that point we had a winner on our hands in terms of, when partners ask you for a more substantial, we've done the earlier workshops, we want something for our expert coaches to really dig into. This is a great workshop for that. But it really does rely on their input. Having said that, I'm going to rely on your input. It is crucial for this workshop that you role play coaches or act as the coaches you are and ask questions and have conversations. Obviously, we'll cut some of them short from what I would do in a normal workshop, but it really relies on your input as much as anything I would tell you in terms of content. So this is a workshop on mastery and coaching for peak performance, and we're going to start right out with talking about a reflection in a scenario. So think about a time your team was really in the zone, or for our psychology people, in their flow state, what allowed your teams to perform so well? And what I'd like you to do is separate out into groups by sport and have no more than 3 or 4 in a group and talk about this for just a couple minutes and say, what was it that made your team feel like they were really playing at their top at that point? So we've gone into groups, we've talked about it. Does anybody have anything that they talked about in their groups that they'd like to talk about in regard to that great team?
They were loose and prepared.
Loose and prepared. Please write that down on your sheets, loose and prepared. That's tremendous. What got them to the point where they were loose? How do you think
they were having fun?
Fun, huge. Write that down. And how about in terms of your role as the coach in preparedness? What did you have a role in keeping them loose, or was it something that came largely from them, or was it just it was a beautiful day out, or what were the contributing factors there other than having fun?
They had a team meeting prior to warm up, and everyone was excited and communicating, and they just felt ready. Awesome.
They felt ready. Those are great. Okay, so any of those words that resonate with you, please write them down. Anybody else, any times you remember specific times when, man, you were just in the zone, you were in the flow and having a great game?
I'll piggyback off of the prepared and say that my team is also very trusting with each other because of the preparedness, them doing team bonding and things like that. So they kind of felt comfortable and they were trusting each other.
Trust, that's a huge one. Another great word for, as we're looking for, some concepts for what we're writing down, and then we'll add tools to concepts. That's great. So we'll probably take a couple more of those. We'll probably query back and forth. I do want to go back, raise your hand or snap your fingers if you were in a Double Goal Coach 1 workshop. So one of our core workshops. And many people have, many people haven't. Thank you. So does anybody want to give me the quick version of what we mean by a Double Goal Coach? Since a number of you have been in that workshop, does somebody want to talk about it? It's mostly right here for you, but what is your phrasing of what it means to be a Double Goal Coach as our coaching model?
Sure. A Double Goal Coach is a coach who not only, strives to win, but also focuses on developing the character of their athletes and teaching them the life lessons that they learn through sports. So
do we still care about winning? I mean, are you guys okay with setting aside winning for life lessons? Tough question.
Yes.
Absolutely.
When push comes to shove.
Okay, when push comes to shove.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that, pushing, coming to shoving. And I'm going to give you a chance to both push and shove throughout the course of this workshop. And then the 3 principles that we talked about in that previous workshop were filling the emotional tank and keeping kids emotionally prepared to play at their best. Focusing on the ELM tree of mastery. Anybody remember what ELM stood for?
Effort,
learning, and mistakes are okay.
Effort, learning, and mistakes are okay. And then the integrity piece, honoring the game. I'm going to take 1 second and jump out because I should have done this at the beginning. The entire structure of this workshop is based on ELM. So not to oversimplify, it is so simple. We talk about effort in a more deep manner, learning, and mistakes in a more deep manner, and then we add a component from Mary Fry at Kansas on caring climate and how that underpins all of those. So if you're looking for a quick structure to this workshop, it is literally in the title of the deep dive. We focus on each of those more deeply than we normally would. All right, back to presentation mode. Great job. That's pretty much what we do in that first workshop. And we talk about creating that triple impact competitor who makes herself better, makes her teammates better, and actually makes the game or her school or her community better. And we connect a principle to each one of those. We're going to focus on the ELM tree of mastery. We're going to focus on keeping them improving and performing as individuals and as a team the best they can. All right, so let's have some fun. What I'd like to do is I would like to have one volunteer who is willing to be and you may role play this or it may be who you really are, but who is willing to be a win at all cost coach. Who's my volunteer? Or before I start volunteering other people. Any win at all cost volunteer? All right, who's this?
It's Keenan.
My man, how are you, Keenan? All right, and then I need one volunteer who is going to be an ELM focused or mastery focused coach.
Scott will do it.
I'll do it.
All right, who did I get?
Scott will do it.
All right, perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So what I want you to do is I want you in about the next 10 seconds to prepare a halftime speech. And that halftime speech is during a basketball game. Your team's down 8. You're not playing your best. Your team seems tentative. It's just not a flow game for you right now. And I want my win at all cost coach to give about a 30-second to 1-minute halftime speech from the win at all cost perspective. And I want my Elm focused coach, my mastery focused coach, to give a halftime speech based on that focus. So my mastery coach is going to talk about effort, learning, and mistakes. And my scoreboard coach is going to talk about results comparing with others and also mistakes. So Keenan, would you please go first and be my halftime speech win at all cost coach and be as exuberant as you would actually be in the locker room at halftime?
Fair enough. I'm going to keep it PG though. What the heck is going on out there, guys? Have you looked at the scoreboard? Can any of you see that we're getting our butts kicked? Johnny, what are those shots you're taking? Who do you think you are, Steph Curry? You think you can hit those shots from 35 feet? Why don't you learn to pass the ball, huh? Ever heard of it? And Tim, turnovers? I mean, why don't you just get the ball on the inbound and hand it off to somebody on the other team? It'd be a lot easier and would require a lot less effort. So, guys, if you want to get back into this game, I don't know if I can help you. It's just not looking good for us today. So, get back out there and we'll see what happens.
All right, 2 claps for Keenan as our win at all cost coach. Thank you. And did we have Scott doing the mastery definition coaching? Was that who we wound up with? Scott, let's hear you.
Yeah, fun. Okay. All right, guys, we're only down 8. I think we've got a chance to get out there. There were some balls on the ground I didn't see everybody dive for. And remember, what are we focused on? Effort. Okay, so I want you to give your greatest effort. There were great picks out there. Joey, I really appreciate the fact that you tried that left-handed layup. So it didn't go in this time. We've been working on it in practice, and I was really proud of the great effort you gave to try it during the game. Well done. Now, guys, I want us to go out there. We're going to continue to give our great effort. We're going to rebound. We're going to get on the ground. We're going to move the ball around. We're going to play great defense. And we're going to give the very best effort we can. And let the chips fall where they may. But 8 points is nothing. We'll be able to get back into this ball game.
I love it. 8 points is nothing. We're back into this. I would play for Scott Seakules. Walking into a Patriots huddle and hearing him take us back out on the field. I like that idea. So now, position yourself as athletes, having listened to each of those coaches at halftime. How did those halftime speeches affect you both mentally, emotionally, and in regard to your performance in the second half? How do you feel as the athlete hearing those words of encouragement?
You have hope you can do it. Whereas when at all costs, there was almost no hope going out to the second half.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that the coach actually said, hey, I don't know how to help you right now. I've definitely seen coaches sort of cross their arms on the bench and give up on their athletes, which I know is definitely a rough message for me as somebody trying to perform my best. So, and any other thoughts, any other emotions that came up as you were listening to those halftime speeches?
At all costs speech. I felt pretty ashamed, kind of called out on my mistakes, so probably afraid to make them again.
Right. Yeah, so definitely fear of mistakes and afraid to make them again because you were called out in a certain way. Something we're going to touch on a little later in the workshop, but that's a great point about how that makes you feel as an athlete. How about one more? And any other thoughts on how you felt as an athlete?
I think
If
the
I'm
second
at,
one.
win it all.
Scott's had a Scott.
Coach Keenan's team, I might really hope that my parents didn't hear that because then I'm going to get it extra on the way home.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's poignant. So my parents didn't hear it because they're going to yell at me too. That's rough, and that certainly plays into that car ride home problem that a lot of athletes have concerns about and anxiety over. So that's exactly what we're talking about here. Even Keenan, who maybe didn't do it the way that was the most effective, he's a coach who wants to win at the end of this game, and we're talking about which of these coaches gave his team the best opportunity to perform at their best coming in to the second half. And that's really the core of what we're going to do in the rest of this workshop. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, in maximizing our effort, learning, and mistakes, we're going to start talking about maximizing our effort. So I want you to think about how you coach at practice and games and how that helps your athletes give maximum effort. And we're going to jump right into a scenario where we're having trouble with it. So one of your coaches on your coaching staff, or maybe an opposing coach or somebody in your system, a rookie coach says, hey, my practice is great, but my guys just are not working as hard at practice, or maybe not working as hard in the game. What I'd like you to do is work again in your groups. I'd like you to switch your groups up so we're not talking to the same people, and write down 3 tools that you would use at practice that would help encourage your athletes to work harder at practice, to give maximum effort at practice. And so we've done that. Anybody want to share any of their 3 tools in their group? Give me one tool, something you could do as a coach, or you could advise that rookie coach, hey, here's something you should try at practice.
Put some competition in.
Clear. Oh.
Competition. I love that. And that's certainly one of the great starting points. Everything in practice can be a competition and drive kids to. I always talk about my young hockey players, and nobody ever started playing hockey because they wanted to do a bunch of drills and edge work, right? So yeah, they want to play hard and compete in practice. Other tools for practice.
Be very clear and concise on the purpose of what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. So they see what's connecting. That's a great point. One more tool. We said we wanted 3. How about one more tool for athletes not giving great effort yet at practice?
Maybe create an award at the end of practice every day that whoever's given the most effort gets recognized. Okay.
So now that leads me to a great question. Thank you very much. How do you know when you're seeing great effort for your sport? So back to your tables, I want you to say, and this is sport-specific tables now, what specific thing do you see at practice that tells you either, hey, my kids are going for it, my kids are working hard, or my kids aren't? So could I get one of those from your sport? Tell me your sport and one thing you see at practice that you know is an indicator of effort or even of lack of effort. What's a specific?
I would say in the sport of softball, I know my kids are ready and giving effort when they are actually paying attention and where they're supposed to be on plays. Because they can easily get distracted because the game kind of moves a little slowly sometimes. So if they're not paying attention, they're not giving effort. They're not 100% there.
Absolutely. So that focus and mental effort. Any one more? How about so we've got the focus and mental effort. How about one physical thing you see on the field or on the court or in the pool during your practice?
So one way I know if my basketball team is ready to go, I know 15 seconds after I walk into the gym, because if they're stretching or leading each other in drills before I even walk in the gym, then I know it's going to be a good day, because I'm already seeing them physically active. They know what to do, and they're already getting ready to have a good practice before I've said a word or blown a whistle.
Awesome. Love it. So what I'd like you to start doing, and use your papers for this, is start creating a toolkit, a toolbox of some of the techniques you've just heard, some of the things that you're looking for. And then I want to ask you, what are some of your tools at this point that you're going to, so we've talked about some of them. What are some things that you're going to do during practice when you say, hey, it's not, maybe we need more effort at practice. Maybe we just want to create a culture where we always have effort at practice. So we talk about creating that culture. What motivates your athletes? What do we adjust in our practice plan? Any other tools, and you can read some of the ones here or bring me any of your own, any tools that you want to suggest to those rookie coaches or to other coaches in the room that are going to make your practice really hardworking and have that pop that we want to see at practice. Any that you see here that you use or that you'd like to talk about? So we can read this all together a little bit, and I can talk about these as well, but I'd love to hear what you do at practice.
One thing that helps my high school basketball team play harder is that when we do a drill, I set 10 minutes on the clock, so they know that the drill is only going to last 10 minutes, and I'm asking for maximum effort in those 10 minutes. If they think a drill is going to last for a half hour or longer, they start to get tired. But as long as they know that it's going to have a beginning and end, I can ask for 10 minutes of max effort and then a little break.
Love it. So they know that's great. So they know what they can put out effort all the way to the end of that. Fantastic. So we talked about competition and having some fun in drills. Is there something you do at practice that's really fun? When your guys like, oh, coach, can we do that drill again? Can we do that game again? And anything other than scrimmaging? I know all our younger athletes, they want to get into scrimmage, but what competitive fun things do you do at your practices that really resonate with your players?
We play like a kind of like a scrimmage, but just against ourselves. We play 21 outs on the field. And we set a timer and we see how fast we can get 21 outs, which is as many outs as we need on defense throughout a game.
Love it. Love it. Great stuff. And what I want to make sure we're doing is we have some tools that we're writing down with our in-sport groups. And we would probably take a couple minutes here to say, okay, what are some things in our sport that we can do? And I love this one that's on the slide, Project Joy. You know, how many times have you seen a coach just look like practice was the worst time of their day, that they're just miserable, that this is just pain, it's just hard work? How does that affect your players when they don't see your joy in the game? Give me any thoughts you have on developing intrinsic motivation, athletes motivating themselves so that they're actually playing for themselves and not just for other, and that they're actually learning to associate effort and enjoyment. What builds that intrinsic motivation as opposed to us yelling at them as extrinsic motivation? How do they get there? It's a hard question, and we can talk about this in groups.
When they recognize success and effort in each other.
Love
so
that.
It's not just your job to do that, but you share the leadership of and the tank filling, so to speak.
Yeah, celebrating each other's success, that's huge. What a great thing. What a great reason to play sports in general and to create a safe environment for them to do that. And that's a great one. Any others to go from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation? Let me ask you this. If you left the gym and your coaches stepped out for a minute, would your players keep working on their game at that point? Why or why not?
Yes.
Yes, that's great to hear. I know my collegiate level athletes or the ones in high school going on to collegiate level athletics, they tend to do that. They tend to say, hey, we're still working on this without regard to whether I'm pushing them to a drill or whatever. But getting athletes to that point, for me, has always been a real challenge. Does anybody have any suggestions for me getting athletes to that point?
I think it's a challenge too. I've seen where developing or asking like, hey, what's something you want to work on? What's something like setting a small individual goal that they can kind of focus on seems to motivate and keep people focused sometimes.
Love it. So you actually ask them what they want.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of that. Huge fan of giving my team back to my team and sort of removing that. I think that was Courtney, right? I think that's one of the best things we can do as coaches is to really give their teams back to them. It's hard to say we want to develop intrinsic motivation and always be the sole driving force, which is obviously of nature extrinsic. So giving them agency, giving their, we have captains drills where captains are going to run these and coaches are going to shut up. It's hard to get myself and my coaches to shut up, but they know how to run the drills and they know how to focus on achieving. And that definitely, I think Courtney is a great one. It helps them move from extrinsic to intrinsic. I want to talk a little bit about, I know a lot of us have talked about effort goals and outcome goals, and we're going to watch a video here. We're not going to watch it on the conference call, where actually one of our trainers is a fantastic soccer coach, explains the difference to her younger athletes between effort and outcome goals. Are we trying to play these, or should I let you guys watch this on your own at some point? I don't know how well it's going to play.
There's two different types of goals that a lot of people
Is that hearable for you?
Outcome goals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. It's a really good video, so I'm going to let it run a little bit.
Outcome goals is something that I try and do as a coach. A lot of times people will focus on score a goal because that's all we think we need to know how to do. But really, maybe it's just getting it to the other half of the field. Maybe it's passing the ball. Outcome goals are things that, for example, on soccer, what the scoreboard says. If it's 2-0, we know that someone's winning, someone's losing. Those are all things that we can't really control, right? But effort is something that you can control 100% of the time. Here you go. Here, pass. As they work up and become more skilled, we always focus on who's going to win, who's going to lose. But there's all these little pieces of the game, all these.
Okay, I'm going to let you watch the rest of that on your own. In the essence of time, it's a great video with Molly does a great job here explaining that to her athletes. Does anybody actually, let's take that back. Let's go back to your tables and write 5 effort and 5 outcome goals for your sport. And we would do that. What's one effort goal you would use at your practice? What would you say is a goal? Now, I would define an effort goal like this. I would say an effort goal is a goal that any of your athletes can achieve without regard to his or her ability in the sport. So for me, in basketball, it's diving for a loose ball. It's hard to do. It takes some courage, but it's not a particularly tricky skill to learn or a technical skill. So what's something in your sport or in your practice that you would call an effort goal?
For water polo, it would be defensive position, so always being in between your player and the goal.
Love it. More.
For softball and baseball would be hustling all times through first base after you hit the ball in play.
Great stuff. How about stuff that doesn't even take place during the actual play of the game? Any of those? Because I have a couple of those too I like at my practices.
Joe, in volleyball, there's downtime between each serve, each rally, and a player that's giving great effort is focused on the other side of the net, what rotation they're in, where's their strong hitter, so that's a sign to me of a player that's giving great effort in volleyball.
That's awesome. Perfect. For me, it's something as simple as sprinting to the huddle. Or we say we clap our way out of drills. When a drill's done or a sequence is done, hey, we all get loud in the gym. We come back, we come together, and then we go out, we sprint out to the next thing. And those things are, real simple. Anybody can do them. For me, they allow me to hold my best athlete accountable and really celebrate the hard work of my least skillful athletes, especially with the youth team. Say, you know what, this kid, that kid is just learning the game and just not really feeling great about it yet. Saying, you know what, this kid is always the first one to every huddle. That's who we need to be. We can also use effort goals as one of our non-traditional metrics. If all we measure is scoring, then what we're telling our athletes we care about is scoring. But if we're measuring blockouts, if we're measuring how many times you sprinted to your outfield position, then we're starting to say this matters to us as a team. This makes us better as a team, and we can quantify effort in that way and say who's doing the little things that anybody could do but not everybody does. So some of the takeaways here. Sometimes we get nervous because we're not working hard, and that's where our lack of confidence comes from. We don't have the control over the results. We do have control over the next moment. We do have control, as you said, getting in defensive position or sprinting through the base. And then we fear losing, and that creates nervousness as well because we're focusing on something, again, way out in the future that we can't necessarily control. So we're talking about process. So the process piece is this. We're going to look at a short video here. What is your role as a coach in developing this effort mentality? And Coach Stevens here talks about how you focus on the process and not just the results to get your athletes in the mindset where they're doing the same. So we'll watch that, obviously. How about you? What do you look like at a game during these situations? Would you be willing to videotape yourself during a game when you're losing by 6 in the last minute? And what would you see? Would you see a strong, confident coach? Would you see worry? Would you see an increased intensity, an increased focus? And the question is, how will your athletes respond? What we found is they'll respond the way you are. So they will respond to your modeling, and they'll respond to how you look on the sidelines. Anybody have any disagreement with that? Is that something that is controversial?
Not at all.
No.
Is it something that?
I think they definitely feed off of your non-communicative movements, and also they feed off of your language or just your face. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah. And is there anybody else who, like me, and I'll be the first to throw myself under the bus here, is there anybody else that, like me, has a hard time with this in a close game? That has a hard time monitoring themselves?
Can I give some pushback too, Joe?
Yeah, please. I want to hear it. That's the best part of the workshop.
So I feel like I struggle with this, coach. I guess maybe it might be where I coach, but it didn't matter. It doesn't matter. It didn't matter how positive I tried to stay or how much I tried to make sure that I look like I'm presenting myself well. I was, like you, not always perfect, but my players often almost rolled their eyes at my response because how could I still be positive when we're losing by 6 in the last inning?
Interesting.
And I think that's where I struggle.
So that is a great point. What do you think is going on with them psychologically and what are they thinking and feeling about the game when they're rolling your eyes saying, boy, coach is just being Pollyanna, coach is being ridiculous right now? What's going on with them?
Well, they're high school girls.
Right.
And I think maybe it's part embarrassment because they have friends at the field or, we didn't have a very successful season. So it was more of a like, here we go again, coach being super positive and yet we're losing again. I don't know. That's truly where I struggle.
Yeah, no, it's a tough one. And what did you do to convince them, or how well did you convince them to get on board with your positive approach? What was a great tool for you that we could all share and learn from?
I don't necessarily think that I mastered that in the moment, but after the game, even with my high schoolers, I always ended with a magic minute, and we had to have the last things we spoke about in finding the positive, and it had to come from the players. So I would pick a handful of players that had to tell me 3 things that they noticed went well about their teammates. So pick a teammate that did something well within the game and share it and call their teammates out in a positive light and focus on those things.
I love it. And was that effective for them?
So, Joe, can I add something here, Joe?
Of course, yeah.
I've got a thought on this. So, being positive when your team is not performing well, or certainly when they're not giving good effort, we're not saying, tell them, hey, this is great. We're dogging it. We're losing by 20. Isn't this wonderful? What we're saying is, rather than rant and rave like Keenan, who has a future acting career, I think, ahead of him, did in his demo, it's guiding our players and like Joe said, bringing their focus to the things they can control. Okay, so here's the situation we're in. It's not where we want to be. What do we have control over here right now? What can we focus on that can help us get this turned around? And but it's not just you don't have to be happy about, and we don't want you as a coach that believes in Elm to be happy if your players aren't giving great effort. And if they are giving great effort, and I think Joe's going to get into this, and the results aren't what we want, then, how do we change our approach? How do we change our strategy? Back to you, Joe.
Great point. Yeah, absolutely. And it isn't necessarily, hey, it's not fun losing. And I don't look like I'm having fun losing, but if you're projecting that sort of intense problem-solving focus, what do we do next? What can we do well right now? They can pick up on that as well. So I don't think it always necessarily needs, hey, everything's great, we're going to get back and win this game. If you're down 20 with 10 minutes to go, you might not be in a winning position, but you're certainly in a position to win that next moment. I talk with my guys all the time about win a moment. Set a great pick, get a great block out, get a great sprint back on defense, and let's build off moment to moment and worry about the moments rather than the score. And for me, that's how I approach them. It's a fantastic question. It really is. So here's the big takeaway.
Hey, Joe, I have
Yep. By all means.
Sorry, I have a comment. So if our team traditionally does like a game ball at the end of every game, and the game ball is really for just being a noticer of good. And so win or lose, we have this game ball situation. And so when we do that, we look for things, throughout the game. Like even if someone was sitting on the bench, another teammate will call them out and say, I really, really enjoyed you cheering us on no matter what, they were injured. So my question is, to kind of create, focus on the whole Elm, do you think it would be a good idea to also add in the idea of adding something we could have done better instead of just focusing on being the noticer of good only?
Absolutely. So what things have we said create effort? We've said that connection with other players creates effort. We've said that having fun, that came up a lot, creates effort. And we've talked a lot about controllable goals, that creates effort. So certainly in the controllable goals area, hey, we can sprint back harder on defense. Is that something we can all commit to be a little bit better? It's not to say we're never going to correct our players. And anybody who's seen me coach would not accuse me of never correcting my players. it's, I think, certainly putting things that are in their effort zone and their competitive and motivational zone, and finding those things for each individual athlete. I think that's the fun part. That's the art of what we do, and the hard part of what we do. I think if the things I'm asking them to improve are outside their, Keenan's example was great. If I'm just talking about winning the game, guys, we got to get 20 points before the end of this game, that will frustrate them because it's not achievable for them necessarily in that moment. It's focusing on a result rather than a part of the process. That's a great question. Any other thoughts on that from anybody else? Want to add to that? All right. So what we're taking away from this, that's a fantastic question. I appreciate it. How do we do these things in practices, and how do we do these things in games? And we share the responsibility for the effort as coaches. So we create a culture where what we do is work hard, first of all, and first and last, and we really emphasize the process in both of these. We create culture and emphasize the process. So we can dig more into effort, but I want to jump forward. I want to make sure we're moving on. We talk about effort, learning, and mistakes. That was effort. We talk about learning and what we're trying to learn. So we're going to go right to another scenario. I'm going to break you up again. We're going to break up into different groups. What I'd like you to do now is break up into separate sports, non-sports groups. So you're in groups of people from other sports because we have so much to learn from people in other sports. And we have an athlete named Chris who's frustrated because she sees that she's not improving, and she's not improving. So in your group, talk about and write down some ideas about what's going on with Chris and what we do to help her out in terms of improving. So we talk about those things. I turn back and say, all right, let's give some advice to a coach. This kid's not improving. What do we do? What's going on? And what's our reaction? So diagnosis and cure.
She's doing the same thing over and over again.
Doing the same thing over and over again. So what we say is, and Kelly Kratz told me this one, I thought it was a great one. If at first you don't succeed, what? What's the rest of it? Try again. Does that make sense necessarily? If at first, second, third, fourth, we don't succeed, keep doing the same thing. Why not? What's going on there?
You're probably redoing the wrong way over and over again. You're not making any adjustments.
Right. We're not adjusting. So adjusting and knowing and this is why you guys are great at what you do. This is why you have expertise as coaches, right? You can see the things incrementally and bit by bit that athletes can adjust to start back on that path to improvement. What else? What's going on with Chris? She's frustrated. And what do you do to help her out?
She may have some like really negative self-talk. So what is she telling herself? Great point. Teaching athletes great high road self-talk. Can somebody give me an example of what we would call high road self-talk? Good self-talk for, let's say she's a tennis player and she just double faulted and she's at the last point of the game. What is some self-talk? What could she be saying to herself? Practice her self-talk for me. In terms of the negative or the positive?
Try a positive one to improve her next serve.
You can do this.
You can do this. You've got this. You've done this.
I served well before. I can do it again.
Love it. Love it.
Think through hard, something specific too.
Absolutely. We can also allow ourselves, allow our athletes to acknowledge disappointment. You say, hey, you know what? That was a bad serve. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. But I'm the kind of person who, so we take the active statement and we say it was an event, and we take the identity statement and say that that's the good thing about us. I'm the kind of person who just goes right back at this serve. I'm the kind of person who's worked so hard on my serve in practice that I can be confident I've got this next one. So that self-talk is a great point, and certainly plays a role in learning. And improvement looks like a stock market graph. Well, not recently. It's going up, but sometimes we have some plateaus, and sometimes we go backwards and slow down a little bit. One of the great words, when we're talking about growth mindset in a minute, we can use is just yet. I can't make that three-pointer very consistently yet. And I certainly ask my players all the time, say, are you the best player in your team? Are you the hardest working player in your team? I say, not yet, coach, but I'm working on it. And really getting them to that growth mindset mentality through using that one really powerful word. So if they're giving maximum effort, then we focus on the effort first off. If they're not giving maximum effort, or if they are giving maximum effort and they're still not showing results, well, then we have to do some of the things we're talking about, change it up. What do we learn? What are some missing fundamental pieces to that skill that we can help them with and help them improve and create a better basis for their performance? Some of those other toolkit things, becoming a noticer of effort, avoiding just keep working. Why not just keep working harder? What's wrong with that?
Because
What's the
they're
danger
probably working hard, and they are just working hard at the wrong thing, maybe.
Right. So let me ask you a question. For you as an athlete, you feel like you're working your butt off, shot's still not going in, you're still not getting the skill, you're getting frustrated, and the coach says, just keep working harder. What is your emotional and psychological response to that?
You stop believing in effort.
Yeah, right? It's frustrating.
Frustration.
Coach, I'm working hard. Coach, I've been working as hard as I can, and it still stinks. And yes, we get incredibly frustrated. So as a coach, how do we help that athlete? How do we get them there? And learning is really the key. How about process praise? What does process praise mean to you? Has anybody heard that term, or just from the words can come up with what they think process praise would be? Praising what instead of what? How about that?
Acknowledge
the steps that it takes to accomplish a bigger goal.
Absolutely. You got your elbow under the ball. I have my younger players in basketball shoot without a basket more than half the time that they're doing shooting in practice, because otherwise they'll really tend to focus on just the results of their shot rather than getting great form, getting great footwork, stepping through their shot, and all the things we teach. A lot of us have read Carol Dweck if we're teachers. A lot of us have read them in book groups, and we've all talked about Dr. Dweck in our Double Goal Coach 1 workshop, and she talks about mindset. But here's a really interesting, different twist that we've been talking with Dr. Dweck recently on mindset. I'm going to let you watch this yourself, but this is the one in which Carol talks about us getting it wrong and focusing on effort when it's not producing results. Remember this? They've seen this more at it. So what Dr. Dweck tells us is that we're missing the point sometimes with mindset. What does she mean by that? What does she mean we're missing the point? From the video. Anybody remember from the video?
She says that sometimes effort alone is not the answer.
Yeah. And when is it not the answer, Ruben? When is effort alone not the answer? Or how do we tell it wasn't the answer? We already talked about it a little bit.
Well, if the results aren't following,
absolutely,
especially over a long period of time.
Absolutely. Effort itself isn't the goal in itself, it's the path. One more scenario here. We're going to go back to the last groups we were in. So you had players set individual goals and nothing came of it. How do you set your individual goals to have that process be most productive? And we would talk about that. Anybody have something they help their athletes with in regard to individual goals and what they're trying to learn?
Be very specific.
Specific is huge. So we talk about SMART goals, specific, measurable goals. What else? What if they didn't achieve their goals and they're just frustrated they didn't achieve their goals? Why might that be?
Talk about why.
Right. Talk about why. Did we overset the goals? Was I trying to dunk at 5'6" and I'm not Muggsy Bogues? I mean, did we set goals that were reasonable that we could monitor over time and create metrics and measurements around? So here's some takeaways and some things we can talk about. Oh, go ahead. I want to hear it.
I would say that even though you didn't achieve the goal that maybe was set out in the beginning, you could also focus on the goals that were attained in the process.
Yeah. And isn't this interesting how this connects now what we talked about with effort and learning, and what Dr. Dweck said is really interesting to me in saying that effort and learning are intrinsically related, right? And they play back and forth on each other in exactly the way you said. We're exerting great effort to learn new skills, and we're really selecting the things that we're trying to learn that motivate us to put forth our best effort. And those are a constant interplay, both as an entire team, but certainly as our individual athletes. And that is where the art of coaching, I think, and the things that you all bring to the table really come into play. Finding those things that help them create those challenging but achievable goals and a path to get to them. And it is specificity, and it is measurement, and it's all of those things that you all talked about. We're going to jump on to one of our last things. We're going to talk a little bit about mistakes, and we're going to use mistakes as ways to grow. So here's another quick scenario. Also my favorite hockey player of all time. So in a preseason meeting, you state that mistakes are essential for team learning and performance, but your assistant coach argues with you, which they never do, and says some mistakes aren't okay. So let's start talking in your groups, and let's go back to sports-specific groups. Are there mistakes that are okay and mistakes that aren't? And guys, this generated such great conversation from our sports psychology professionals in our meeting at Trainer Institute. What mistakes are worthwhile and helpful, and what mistakes are not, or are some better than others? How do you help with this? This is a sticky, tough question, too, in real life.
I think mistakes where you're going 150% are very acceptable, in my opinion. Those are good mistakes because the effort is there, and it's easier to rein it in a little bit than to have someone give more.
Great point. Great point. So full effort mistakes are going to be okay for us. Is there a converse to that? Are half effort mistakes not okay to you?
Yes, those are not okay.
Got it. Okay, great. We're definitely going to talk about that concept. Other thoughts about different types of mistakes? Are all mistakes equal, maybe?
I would say that just based on what Coach Maggie just said, I think that there can be some half-effort mistakes that, if they're repeated, are not great and need to be addressed.
Ding,
but
ding, 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 ding.
The first couple of times it happens, it needs to be a conversation with the athlete about why it's happening, because it could be a hesitation, it could be a need for further, development in a particular skill. So we first need to see why that half effort is happening. And if it becomes a habit, then yes, certainly something that needs to be addressed.
So that there were a couple things, a lot in there. Go ahead, keep talking.
Yeah.
I was going to add on and say, is this half mistake? Because there is a fear of making a mistake. Have we set up a culture where, maybe, at some point we have criticized them for that,
right.
And they are fearful of doing it. And so getting to the root of it, I think, is also important.
Great point. So what is the root of the mistake? And certainly I like what you said, Keenan, and I heard you too, Scott, say, hey, these half-effort repeated mistakes are something that we're going to address on some level. What is it what do athletes really fear with mistakes? What do they fear most? If we say that fear cripples us and fear causes us to create less effort, and less effort just leads to more repeated mistakes, what is it that they're afraid of on your team or on any team?
Judgment, being benched.
I heard a few at once. I'm sorry, I couldn't parse them out.
Judgment,
being the one
being
that
benched.
lost the game.
Judgment, getting benched, being the one that what?
Lost the game.
Right, losing the game, right? Taking that game-winning shot and missing, or making a mistake and turning the ball over in the last minute of the game, and it feels like that was the most important play of the game. Absolutely, those are things. So certainly, we need to know what things our athletes are worried about with mistakes. So we're going to talk about mistakes being important to learning. And how do you know if your kids are improving in a drill if nobody ever loses the ball? If none of your skaters ever falls doing edge work? We need to see that and help our athletes do things that are difficult but achievable, and that's part of this learning process. How about mental mistakes? Anybody have any thoughts on those being a different type of mistake?
I would say they are. If go ahead.
Go ahead,
I would
Jeff.
say they are different if it's lack of preparation, especially with older kids. If you have taxed them to learn plays and learn fundamentals and things like that, and then they show up to practice and are repeatedly making that. Well, there's another thing: repeated mistakes. They're making mental mistakes that you've asked them to be prepared to not make. To me, that's an issue.
So to me, Scott, that falls under the third bullet point there, lack of effort. Preparation is part of effort. So that's where I'd put that one in.
Absolutely.
And I agree with you. That therefore, it's not okay.
And Keenan mentioned, and Scott said too, about repeated mistakes. That's to tell us something too. Certainly if they're doing the same thing wrong repeatedly, then that's telling us something as a coach. Could be any number of things it is telling us in terms of their preparedness in the technical skill, in terms of their mental preparedness, but it's certainly stuff that we need to use to influence their next learning moment and how they're going to focus on this. And you also
Joe?
Yes, please.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
So if a player shows up and the player has twisted his or her ankle but is able to go, and as a result of this injury makes a technical or physical mistake during the game because they just couldn't plant the way they normally would plant.
Sure.
Should a coach have a little extra understanding about that?
My question to you would be, was that a mistake?
So then my counter is, on the mental side of things, for all we know, somebody failed a test or just broke up with a boyfriend or girlfriend. There might be something going on that isn't as obvious or worthy of or likely to result in a conversation like a sprained ankle might, that could have caused that mistake. It shouldn't be treated any differently then.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. And we talk about, I don't make a big distinction personally between mental and physical mistakes. And certainly working with that athlete to know where they are and showing them, I mean, what you just said even denotes a huge caring about your athlete as an individual and as a person and wanting to know what's going on with them that day. Maybe they're struggling to focus because of a tragedy in their lives or a difficulty in their lives. And helping them through that is certainly part of what we do. And I know Emily talked about self-talk and how they approach themselves in those situations. And those are all certainly things that are part of our task as a coach to help them identify those things for themselves or find out with them what's going on and how can we best approach this. And certainly every bit of this, as it says there on the slide, is information for us. You know, what are we learning about our athletes here? How about if they did?
Joe,
Yep.
could I jump in? If I understood Jason's question, my personal opinion is, as a coach, you definitely have to adjust your expectations for an injured player. And if you're playing if you decide to put an injured player onto the playing field in practice or competition, that you got to take into account that they're injured. Yeah, So to me, my answer to Jason's question is, you adjust your expectations, and you do. I think you do cut them a little slack if you put them out there.
It's a great point.
Well, and I think the greater thought was, if you see somebody make a mental mistake, maybe that tells me as a coach, to pull that person aside and just kind of ask, is everything okay? Because we're assuming that the mental mistake was based on a lack of paying attention or something like that. Maybe it's actually an opportunity to check in with them.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And like it says on here, and I can't emphasize this enough, it really is information for us as coaches to help these athletes and to help them play better, and to play better both in the next play and to extend, that progress through the rest of their sports and even non-sports experience. And that sensitivity to what's going on with them is huge, right? That's a big deal. Does anybody remember what we talked about with mistake ritual in the first workshop? Can anybody describe a mistake ritual to me? Because we've definitely covered this one in our previous workshops. And somebody would, and you guys can do that.
Joe, it's a routine that you go to. It's a rehearsed routine or that you go to move beyond, help you move beyond mistakes.
Awesome.
I think that's what it was.
Flush it.
Flush it. Love it. Great example. So yes, some physical manifestation of responding to a mistake to get to the next play. We're going to show a couple quick videos. If you guys haven't seen this one yet, please go watch it because it's funny and cute. I don't know if we can see it here. Let's see if we can see it. I know we're almost out of time, but it's worth seeing. So the coach is telling him, keep your eye on the ball. And he does. So what does that tell us about the language we use with our players and our vocabulary with our players?
But they take things differently than we may.
Right. Yeah. They don't always know the words we're using. So it's a great example. And then Ruben explained a mistake ritual. We're going to watch one of our great coaches, Cam Campbell, actually using a mistake ritual, and his team. We're not going to watch this video right now, but his team makes a mistake near the end of the game, and he brings them in for the timeout and says, "Hey, flush it. Let's go on to the next play." And they, of course, win the game. So one more takeaway, and we talked about this at the beginning. I forget who mentioned it. I apologize, but we talked about those mistakes that are aggressive, working hard, and mistakes that are tentative. And we certainly want, and I agree with the coach earlier who said we want that aggressive mistake, or what Mike Krzyzewski or Herb Brooks would call a mistake of commission. Commit a mistake. Go out there and go so hard that something doesn't go perfectly. As opposed to that mistake of, I'm not sure what to do, maybe coach won't see it if I do nothing at all. Has anybody experienced that?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we're a little pressed on time. I want to make sure I get through this. Here's the big takeaway on this. Fearing any mistake is going to be a detriment to the athlete's improvement and performance. So certainly we're going to deal with mistakes, and we have ways of dealing with mistakes that are, and I'm grateful for what Jason said about responsive to what our athletes' needs are and taking in the information that they've given us through their mistakes. But if we cause our athletes to worry, am I coming out of the game? Am I going to be ridiculed? Are my parents going to say something terrible? That's the sort of thing that makes it really hard for them to perform at their best. So to what degree is it important that the athletes know coach cares about them? And we would talk about this. I'm actually going to cut this a little short because we're out of time a little bit. I had a team once where I loved my players to death, and they still had a toxic culture among the team. And it was tough for me to learn this next concept, which is the development of a caring climate. We're fortunate to work with Dr. Mary Fry at University of Kansas, who's done a lot of the real hard research in this, and it's really fascinating stuff. So let's define it first. Could somebody please read this? How about, who's there? Ruben, I hear you a lot. I know you're on, so could you please read this for me?
A caring climate is one where everyone involved with the team is treated with kindness and respect. All the interactions among and between athletes reflect this spirit. People feel comfortable, valued, and welcome.
So when you walk into the gym, or when you walk into the pool area or the football field, do you feel comfortable, valued, and welcome? Now, let's say we had this situation. Does this actually contribute to peak performance? Any thoughts on that? Does this make us any better, or does it just make us nicer?
I think it makes it better.
Well, thank you for saying that. I don't know who that was, but Mary actually had some of her research assistants do some specific research on whether it makes us better. And what this video describes is that the teams that exhibited a caring climate actually had more assists and fewer turnovers, the basketball teams. So it contributed to them playing better. And that concept of creating that is huge. It's a prerequisite for all these other things we're talking about. Effort learning mistakes won't work if athletes walk into the gym fearful emotionally or psychologically that they're not in a place where people care about them, and not just the coach. We have to model it and create that interaction. Somebody talked about some team building things with all of our athletes taking care of each other when they come in the gym. How do you greet your teammates when you come into the gym? Does anybody have a great tool for that, or ritual for that they use in their practice? One real quick one. What do you do when your practice starts? Or do they just come in and kind of do their own thing? Any thoughts?
We do a rock, paper, scissors tournament to kick it off.
Love it.
Get energy flowing, just do something interesting and different.
Fun. Love it. And just think about what that says with your athletes. Hey, we do something about us first. We do something where we connect and laugh and enjoy each other's company first. Because in a minute, we're going to work really hard together, and we're going to go at each other. And we need to know that we walk into a place where people care about us, not just the coach, but the other athletes as well. So we definitely focus on that 5-to-1 plus to minus ratio, that positive to negative feedback ratio. We definitely want to connect with every athlete, have every athlete connect with every athlete as well. Knowing names is huge. And then who talked about the magic minute? I loved the magic minute.
Me.
That was great. And we call that a winner's circle. After the game, after practice, hey, who did great? What are we doing? And we relentlessly fill each other's tanks. You know what? That's a great shot. Man, I love being on a team with you. Love playing with players like you. So we would then recap, and we'll go back to our sheets and talk about some of the tools that either you've written down or we've written down in each area. And I want you to circle or write down one that you're going to try. And here's what I feel about trying. Try something you don't want to try. Every day we ask our athletes, hey, try something new. And in fairness, sometimes myself, sometimes other coaches I see, we don't hold ourselves accountable to what we're asking of our athletes. So take something you're not comfortable with. Take something that that might work, it might not. Take something that makes you feel a little silly and circle that one or write that one down and say, here's what I'm going to do today or tomorrow at practice that is not in my comfort zone, and see how this goes with helping my athletes play their very best. Guys, that's the core of this workshop, and as you see, it's really about your interaction. And when your trainers go out there, it's really their job more to just elicit as much expertise and thought and fun and hard thinking. And I love the pushback, and I actively encourage pushback from these coaches so that this workshop is very real and relevant to helping them go out and have a great practice when they walk out of this. So thank you very much for your time, and we'll do the question section.
Joe, nice work.
I don't have a question.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for you. I get to see you do workshops more often than most, but you put the same effort into these that you do your regular workshops, so it's a huge help.
Thank you. These are fun. I really do have fun with these workshops. I'm sorry?
This workshop was really amazing. It was eye-opening for me. This is Carolyn. But what I got from it mostly was really that communication. Because if you have that constant communication, it can address the effort. It can address, what you're learning, what you're not, what you're doing well, how to get through the mistakes. And at the same time, it is absolutely letting them know that they care. So this was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Carolyn. Yeah, it's a fun one to do. It really is, because the coaches interact is so powerful in this.
Joe, this is Courtney. I have two things. One is I don't know if you have it handy, and if not, maybe you can pull it up. But just to show people the handout that we have that goes along with this workshop, in case people aren't familiar with it, just to pull it up on the screen while we're talking.
I don't have it right here, Court. Sorry. Do you have it up on your screen? I could transfer over to you.
Yeah. Or I can email it to you real quick. Either way, whatever you want to do is fine.
I'll look for it. Go ahead.
And then the other thing is I just making sure. I know Jack, I think you were the one to ask last time about a workshop outline, and Joe, I know you touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but I'm just making sure people are feeling good about in their heads, when you go back and you're talking to a prospect, do you feel good about the outline of this workshop? Is there anything else you want Joe to touch on for that?
Great question.
Yeah, I would think describe the 3 or 4 main sections. Like if you were trying to train a trainer, there's this section, like an intro, an e-tank, kind of like DGC1. Is there something for that, that you could kind of manifest with mastery?
Absolutely. Well, the beauty of it is it's really right in the title, and we're really going to work with coaches not just to understand concepts, although there's new concepts in this, but to develop tools for their most difficult situations. One of the things I say to coaches pretty repeatedly in workshop is, the quality of coach you are is the coach you are to your least skillful player, the player that you're struggling with, the player you don't know how to help them improve. And what I'd like to make sure we do in this workshop is to walk out with some concrete tools to help them improve.
Joe, can I add there? I'm going to take a stab also at answering Jack's question slightly different way. So the outline of this workshop is there's 4 main sections. There's a section on maximizing effort, maximizing player effort. There's a section on maximizing learning and improvement. And there's a section on maximizing mistakes as learning opportunities. And those 3 sections are indeed in the title, as Joe said. There's a 4th section, which is not in the title, which is caring climate as an underpinning to making Elm powerful and effective. that's really the outline. If you wanted to add something, you could say there's also an opening that's kind of creating a foundation for the rest of the workshop, and there's a closing section. That's how I would describe the outline.
And I think, thank you, Ruben. And I think also, because I hear a lot of my partnership managers and support managers talk about this, this really is a next level workshop for your coaches who've been through the first one, or who, I know sometimes you guys face partners who feel like some of our earlier workshops are too basic for them. And I think that's also a point you could bring up in the overall description and outline of this workshop, that it really delves more deeply into concepts. And I don't think this is simple or trivial at all, but it really does rely on their coaches working at the workshop.
Joe,
one example.
Joe, getting back to Courtney's question, and Jack, was what we just shared with you, is that sufficient?
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, it's a quick kind of bullet list, like what are the main 4 topics we're covering. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing that if I were a partnership manager that I might say about this workshop is, in the Double Goal Coach workshop, we talk about, mistakes being okay. I mean, that's something that we learn when we learn about what ELM is. And on the surface, that's good for a coach to walk away with who's gone through Double Goal Coach 1, right? Just that mindset that, hey, I shouldn't punish kids for mistakes. It's part of the process. We need them. But then when you get to this workshop, you could say to a prospect, this is where once a coach is out on the field then, and they start to encounter repeat mistakes or mistakes that are sort of around sportsmanship or these other situations where as a coach then you're thinking to yourself, okay, PCA said mistakes are okay, but I'm struggling a little bit with how to handle this in these certain situations. So this is a workshop that kind of, with each of those 3 topics, maximizing effort, maximizing learning, maximizing mistakes as growth opportunities, that it teases out some of those gray areas or some of the challenges in that, and gets people to have a discussion about it and to gain clarity on how to move forward as a coach. To me, that's why it's a deep dive. It really kind of gets at some of those core issues.
Great point. Does that help, Jack?
Yeah, definitely has. Yeah, that's
awesome.
Great.
Joe, I have a question.
Sure.
Sorry. This is Maggie. Thank you so much for doing this. This is the first time I've seen the Mastery workshop, so I really appreciate getting a sneak peek kind of into what it's all about. I liked how it was so scenario-based. I think that is really valuable as a coach to think about the things that you do, what you could be doing better, but also I think it gives the partner maybe a more customized feel to the workshop as opposed to teaching them tools. You're giving them real life scenarios that could be helpful. So I really like that aspect about it a lot. I had a question about a specific slide and one of the specific scenarios, if that's okay.
Of course, which one?
The one where it talked about individual goals and nothing coming of it. I was curious if that meant nothing much coming of it, meaning they didn't even get close and there was no, it just fell totally flat, or I think it was Carolyn that brought it up, but talking about learning, focusing on the goals that you achieved on your way trying to achieve this individual goal, like just a little clarification on what
Sure.
nothing much came of it meant.
And Courtney, Ruben, and Kelly, please feel free to jump in. It's a great question. My take on it is we're talking about goals specifically in the context of learning. And certainly from the learning psychology standpoint, we're looking at, did we set goals that were appropriate to where we are in our learning process? We talk about zone of proximal development, or the term we use is just right goals and just right challenges. And this connects to learning in regard to that sort of focus, I think, and looking at whether we're setting good goals to start out with, and whether we're adjusting them as we go. Does that help a little bit? I'm not quite sure if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, no, that's helpful.
And Joe, go to the next slide, because I think that kind of helps to define what we mean by it too. Yeah,
where this conversation started as we were developing the workshop, Maggie, and I probably should have explained this better, probably should focus on this slide a little more, is, Ruben started a great conversation about how do we focus on individual goals while focusing on team goals? How do we keep those things both moving forward? And it's tricky. I mean, it's certainly challenging to get athletes improving individually and our team improving in total. And that was where this conversation began, as I recall. My goal in much of this is to very clearly connect that effort, learning, mistakes they're not separate issues. They're a process that flow together and have interplay with each other. That our effort and learning have a lot of interplay of how great effort creates great learning, and then great learning helps athletes produce their maximum effort as well. And those things are not separate. And certainly this plays into that piece.
So knowing that the prerequisite to this would be the Double Goal Coach 1, would this necessarily be the next step instead of Double Goal Coach 2, or could it be either?
I think it could be either. I think other people have better comments on that. I think it depends on the needs of the program that you're talking to. Certainly these, or for that matter, the other deep dive workshop, the positive motivation workshop.
Courtney, do you mind jumping in with on that question?
Yeah, definitely. I was going to pull up a document to.
Let me shift over to you for it.
Wait, not yet. Let me get. I'm trying to find.
And I'll give you a little bit of background. We have a paddling partner that has done the Double Goal Coach 1 workshop for 3 years now. And although they get new coaches in every year, some of the coaches have stayed. So probably about 70 to 80% of the coaches remain. But because they have new coaches coming in, then they traditionally just say, we'll do the Double Goal Coach 1 again to get everybody back on the same page. So the older or seasoned coaches are feeling like, this isn't very, it's not helping us. We've been through this enough. And if they only have one workshop, what would be the recommendation?
Joe, you can switch to my screen whenever you're ready.
You bet.
And just before Courtney shares that document, so Carolyn, all the workshops, we try to design them in a way where they can work as follow-ups to other workshops, or they can work as standalone. The fact of the matter is, like you said, in almost every workshop now, it's a mix of coaches who've been through a PCA workshop before and coaches who haven't. So we want it to work for both. Early in the workshop, Joe asked us, how many of you have been to a PCA workshop? And that may affect, if he gives a little more time, a little more description early on the opening. Remember I said the opening is kind of a foundational piece. Does he take a little more time making sure we understand the three principles and how ELM is one of these three principles that we're going to focus on today. And then the other part I was going to say, and this is what Courtney's going to get to, is that after a Double Goal Coach, 80% of the coaches have been through Double Goal Coach 1 recently. I would not repeat that. I would do one of the other workshops, and the trainer's going to give those new coaches the foundation necessary to benefit from the next workshop. So with that, I'll turn it over to Courtney.
And can I make one more quick, just maybe thought on that? If you do have inexperienced and experienced coaches in the same room in an organization, I think it might be an opportunity to tell the partner, this is a chance for your experienced coaches to really bring along your less experienced coaches. One of the things I work with organizations on all the time is, how well are you using your great coaching to make your newer coaching better? So if you have a great football coach at your school, does that mean your girls volleyball coach is a better coach? And if not, why not? And so this could be a way of leveraging that idea and saying, I really want to rely on the voices of those experienced coaches in your organization to make the younger ones a little stronger.
That's great. Thanks, Fuller. Thank you.
Is my screen sharing right now, Joe?
Yep.
So.
You're up. No, you are.
Okay. So this is obviously a little outdated because this is when we were in the middle of developing the Elm Deep Dive, so it says title TBD. But this is what I shared. I think it was the 2016 all-staff meeting. This just gives you a little bit of a visual, Carolyn. But the idea is you start with Double Goal Coach 1 at the youth level, and you can really go either way. You can go right to the middle to the deep dives if they feel like, hey, we're really struggling with, coaches riding their players on mistakes. Great, let's talk about that. If you want to go to Double Goal Coach 2 first and then come back into the middle, you can do that. So just a visual in case that helps it stick a little bit about the ordering of all these.
Right, thanks.
I think that one thing I want to just bold and underline that Ruben said is I think it's just so key to, if someone says, oh, we've done all your workshops, or, we've done, or you say, okay, well, you did Double Goal Coach 1 last year, now let's move on to Double Goal Coach 2, making sure that we're really figuring out, you look at EMS and you say, okay, how many of their coaches attended last year? They've got 50 coaches and 24 were there for Double Goal Coach 1. So do we check the box then for they did Double Goal Coach 1 and we move on to the next one? Or what do we do at that point? How do we make sure that we're bringing along the people that maybe went before, but the people who haven't, maybe that's the year that you split out and do 2 coach workshops. It's not always possible. I get it with the budgets and everything, but just making sure that if you see something that they did last year in EMS, or they tell you, oh, we've done those before, that you drill down on that a little bit, and that you're not afraid to be the expert in that situation to say, I get what you're saying, that you offered that workshop last year, but less than 50% of your coaches went to it or whatever. So I think that's such a critical time that, I know how it goes. You can call them 10 times. You finally get them on the phone. You're just trying to get the workshop scheduled, and to pause and go into all those details may feel like, am I going to lose them? Am I going to get them on get the workshop scheduled? But it's just such a critical time to make sure that we're delivering a product that's going to meet their expectations in the end.
Did you want to go over the chart anymore, Courtney, or are you good?
I'm good. Yeah, you can take it back. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Any other questions, thoughts, comments, funny stories? Do you enjoy this workshop? Is it something that you feel your partners would get value from?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun one. It really is. I think they all have their own moments and trickinesses, but I really enjoy the fact that this one really openly encourages them to. It certainly has new concepts, but for them to provide their expertise.
If anybody wants to see Joe do this in front of a live studio audience, they can come to Chicago on Tuesday.
That's right. We'll be doing it Tuesday at our oldest high school partner, our original high school partner.
Carolyn, it is a balmy 40 degrees today.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
It is as warm as it's been in weeks.
Keenan, let us know when Joe's going to Hawaii to demo this in front of a live audience.
I promise it'll be in the 80s.
Carolyn, help me out here.
We'd love to have you.
If people don't want to go to Chicago, though, we do have a video of I'm doing this workshop with an associate trainer that we do have on the PCA trainer blog. So if anybody does want to see it live in rainy Pennsylvania at the time, you're welcome to check that out.
Are there, just a question for myself, are there things that you would like to see me improve and help our trainers improve in delivering or messaging this workshop correctly for you? Are there things that you thought, boy, it would be a little better if we did this? I love hearing that stuff.
This is Brandon in Philadelphia. First, I just want to say that I really do like this workshop a lot. I think that the DGC1 can sometimes really be an eye-opener and resetting priorities, but this one really gives concrete tools and goes a lot deeper into things. So I really love it. I had a question, and I guess I know this is a new workshop, and as we find out more of the data behind it, how many of these workshops are being done for schools and how many of them are being done for youth sports organizations, because I see it really great for our high schools and a lot of the high school partners we're doing here. And my only question on that would be how hard would it be to change out some of the actual images, just the little images of the players with older athletes, and kind of have two different decks, one for high schools and one for youth sports organizations? And the only reason I say that is because I know that some of these grizzly old high school coaches are just looking for one thing for them not to kind of resonate with some of this material, which they shouldn't be able to do because this is all great stuff. But if they see like a little kid, maybe they think that this is great for youth sports organizations, but not for more advanced high schools.
So let me make a comment before I get in trouble with Courtney. Too bad, but and I don't think I will actually. We are moving a little bit away from making separate decks for these things. We do in some cases where it makes a lot of sense, but what we want to focus on more is having the trainers really feel comfortable in making the deck look like what will be best for that partner. So other than taking this picture out, which is absolutely forbidden, we really encourage our trainers to make that make sense for that school, ideally even with school photos, and things that have their athletes. They love seeing their own athletes. In terms of making new decks, the multiplicity gets a little bit nuts, and Courtney's done a really nice job of creating an area on TrainerShare where trainers have more access to various types of photos. Is that?
Yeah, Brandon, let me add one thing. In general, and I know there's exceptions here. Clearly, the picture of Joe's son, which is so beautiful, is an exception. In general, we do try to skew the deck and the images older in general to get at what, because it's more of an issue when you're in front of high school coaches and you're showing 6 and 8 year old athletes, as opposed to when you're in front of coaches of 6 and 8 year olds and you're showing high school age athletes. So what you're saying is very valid. So Joe, I do think I know you're kidding when you say we cannot.
Oh yeah, no, you can take
it might be worth us swapping that image out for an older athlete. The Molly Hellerman video, her soccer players look like they're 10, 12-year-olds. As a trainer, if I'm taking this workshop into a high school, I would make a judgment call on do I actually play that video. But for the same reasons you just said, Brandon, it's so easy for high school coaches to go, oh, you see that picture there on slide 22? This workshop's not for us, Yeah.
And I would just say, Brandon, the last thing I'll add is that is like textbook perfect information to be in the workshop notes for a trainer. Hey, this AD is looking for a way to make this not be the right fit for him. Like, make sure all of our photos are skew older. Like, that's a excellent piece of information. And like Joe said, that's exactly why we've made it really easy for trainers to search our photo library so they can swap things out.
Yeah, that's an explicit goal of our team this year, Brandon, is to help trainers really modify with different scenarios, different photos, things that make sense for those partners. I agree with you. And sometimes the ones I find too, Brandon, a lot is if I'm working with an emerging sport, they really get sensitive to having a bunch of football pictures. So if I'm working with competitive cheer and dance, I'm not going to have a lot of football pictures because they already feel the pressure of feeling underrepresented.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Thank you. And I'll definitely make sure to make notes for our trainers now that I know that that's a possibility. And the last thing that I would want to do is make sure that we were tailoring and customizing decks for every partner. But it just seemed to me that if I was watching it as a high school coach who's been coaching at high school level for 20 years, if I saw a slide that had great information on it, but it had a little kid picture, my mind might kind of, go to a place where I couldn't truly hear it.
True. No, it's a great point. And you have to know that partner and you have to know that situation. And, I know Kelly and I have talked about this extensively, but I change my presentation for every workshop I do on some level. And sometimes those are fairly superficial. But, I think all our trainers should be doing that to some extent. And we can encourage them to do that. And if you find they're not doing it in a workshop, we can help them improve on that.
Perfect. Thanks.
So as we near 10:30 Pacific time, 1:30 Eastern, I think we should wrap up here. I want to, before I turn it over to Ripper to see if Ripper has anything else to say, any other feedback, questions, comments, please feel free to reach out to any of the training department staff. If you want to direct it to me and CC the rest of the group so that they can chime in. But we very much value your feedback. We value the questions like the one Katie sent us ahead of time. What an awesome turnout and what awesome participation today. And
personally,
Joe, before you jump in, Joe,
yeah.
hey, I don't know how we do this, but Joe, just want to express the whole group's appreciation for this awesome demo. So thank you very much,
Thank
Joe.
you. And I love getting direct calls. I really do. It's I like the chance to talk to you and talk through stuff that is about workshops and not about workshops, and that does not have to be my chapters. I think we all feel that way. It's great just to talk about, Scott Seekels and I have a great conversation about a lot of workshops, and frankly, it makes me a ton better every time he calls. So feel free to call any of us whenever.
Ripper, do you want to close us out here?
Sure. First of all, thank you guys for the effort in doing this and putting in the time to educate us. It's very important. We have staff on the call besides PMs, but PMs from many different years of experience, and this is just very valuable. And then thanks to the team for the being so interactive and willing to participate. Not always easy in this type of setting. You came prepared and really participated, and want to know how much I appreciate you making this such a valuable experience as well in that respect. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Rip.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you all.